Welcome to 28 Storms. This is your tropical weather update for the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific on this Tuesday, June 14th, 2011. The Atlantic remains quiet, but to no surprise, if you were watching yesterday's video, it looked like the Eastern Pacific was not going to stay in much of a lull following Hurricane Adrian. It's only been a few days, but it looks like we're going to get our second named storm of the season not too long into the immediate future. The National Hurricane Center has already outlined an area to the south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec as saying this tropical disturbance has a 10% chance of becoming a tropical cyclone within 48 hours. This was the morning surface plot analyzed by the National Hurricane Center earlier this morning. As you can see, there are no distinct features in the Atlantic Basin, with the exception of these very weak tropical waves passing across the eastern Caribbean and central Atlantic, but none of these waves show any signs of development in the immediate future. There aren't any plotted surface lows in the eastern Pacific as of the creation of this surface plot either, although as you can see that monsoon trough is hanging tough to the south of Central America, near Guatemala, Panama, and Costa Rica, and within the next 2 to 3 days we're definitely going to see an increase in low pressure, and we'll probably see more defined areas of surface low pressure very soon. The strongest tropical wave currently in the Atlantic is now beginning to move into the Windward Islands, which is going to increase the rainfall over the next 48 hours in this area. But it's moving into the Caribbean Sea where upper level conditions are really not favorable at all. We have a lot of descending air over the central Caribbean, as you can see with all of this dry air in place. And there's also a lot of westerly winds aloft. So as this tropical wave continues to move westward, we're not expecting anything in the way of tropical development. And in the long run, it looks like it's probably going to run into Central America, and of course we won't get any development as that system moves more inland. We have a much more active pattern in the eastern Pacific where it looks like a second tropical cyclone will form in the coming days. The first area worth monitoring is this 10% outlined disturbance to the south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. This has a 10% chance of becoming a tropical cyclone within the next 48 hours, although it would not surprise me at all if the more prominent low-level energy is still coming in from the east. As you can see on the latest visible, there's a very strong disorganized area of developing low pressure now beginning to exit South America, and it would not surprise me one bit that it will take both of these systems a couple days to really come together before we begin to see a true motion toward tropical cyclone development. I really think both of these features will come together to form a much stronger and broader area of low pressure over time. This idea really isn't so much of a stretch after one looks at the latest 850 millibar vorticity analysis. As you can see, there is weak low-level vorticity all along the monsoon trough that's dangling from west to east, and it's just going to take a couple days for a more dominant low-pressure area to begin to form, and then once that occurs, we'll see more development toward a tropical cyclone if conditions remain favorable. As of right now, conditions are already fairly conducive for development. We already have a weak upper level low located over the central Gulf of Mexico, but that's really far to the north, and it's really not going to increase the wind shear down here so much. In fact, it's only going to help ventilate the upper level ridge to its south. And as we can see, there's quite an abundance of moisture in the eastern Pacific with that monsoon trough well in place, and so overall conditions look fairly good. Another promising sign for Eastern Pacific development over the coming week is the fact that an upward pulse of the Madden-Julian Oscillation is beginning to move into the basin. As we look back just 3 days ago on June 10th, we had a lot of downward motion occurring over much of the Central and Eastern Pacific, which is not favorable for tropical cyclone formation. But over just the last 3 days, we've seen a dramatic shift, and we now are beginning to have some upward motion or enhanced upward motion beginning to traverse the Central Pacific, and this is working its way toward the east, so the MJO should be fairly favorable for this thing to begin to develop over the coming week. Here is a different representation of the latest wind shear analysis. As you can see, there is a fairly strong anticyclone in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere over much of Mexico and the far northeast Pacific, and the low-level steering will take any developing broad area of low pressure a bit closer to the Mexican coastline over the next 72 to 96 hours underneath this favorable upper-level anticyclone. So upper-level conditions are expected to remain favorable. This afternoon's model guidance is having a hard time depicting the two competing areas of low pressure that are now taking shape south of Central America. This is the latest 850 millibar vorticity forecast. Here is our monsoon trough draped from west to east, and over the next 24 hours in this model you begin to see that it is picking up on both areas. This is the day 1 forecast, day 2, and The area that the National Hurricane Center is currently monitoring in their tropical weather outlook is now located right about here in 48 hours. And then we have a second area of low pressure beginning to appear in the vorticity in 48 hours. By day 3, both low pressure areas begin to intensify further, and by day 4, both of them are making a run at tropical cyclone status, which is possible. But the closer that they are, it's going to be harder for both of these to develop. Eventually, one will more than likely have to become the more dominant storm. And we begin to see that toward the end of this run. This is now day 5, and we now have a merger of these two tropical cyclones. It probably won't play out exactly like this in real life. Usually, one will become a lot more intense before the other one really has a chance to even become a significant tropical cyclone. And by day 6, we now have a primary storm located not that far away from Acapulco, Mexico. At this point, it's too far out to really say whether or not this storm will really threaten the Mexican Riviera, but interests along the central Mexican coast definitely have enough reason to keep an eye on the weather over the next 5 to 6 days. The model we just looked at was the 12Z ECMWF. Now we're going to take a look at the 12Z Canadian model. And much like the ECMWF, it's struggling with all of the competing areas of low pressure down to the south. But overall, it shows developing low pressure near the coast of Mexico over the next 6 days. Finally, in terms of models, this is the 12Z GFS forecast, and within 2 to 3 days it develops a more dominant area of low pressure before intensifying it further into a tropical storm or hurricane. As you can see, it's developing this system just to the south of Mexico's coastline. And the one good thing about this run is that it takes anything that does develop out to sea versus taking it more toward the north into Mexico. So we'll gladly go ahead and take that solution if in fact a storm were to develop. So that sums up your weather in the tropics today. We're still expecting the Atlantic to remain fairly quiet over the next week, but it looks like we're going to get our second named storm of the year in the eastern Pacific within 3 to 5 days. It's too early to say whether or not it will make an impact or a direct impact along Mexico, but it certainly bears watching if you live along those central areas of the coastline. Either way, whether or not the storm does develop or actually make an impact on Mexico, we'll keep an eye on things over here at 28storms.com, and we'll have another video for you guys by tomorrow afternoon, so check back soon.